A great prophet once said, "Wherever two or more are gathered, there is conflict." Actually, that's not what the prophet said, but it's true, right? Sometimes it's as simple as whether the toilet paper should come off the roll from the top or the underneath, and there's a right answer for that. Sometimes it's as complex and long-standing as the conflict between Palestine and Israel, or red states and blue states. As I speak here today about conflict, I do want to clarify that I'm not talking about a conflict situation that is dangerous or abusive. If that's the case in your life, please seek help from someone who can help you be safe while you find your way. Today, I'm talking more about both garden variety, relatively benign but stressful conflict among people, and larger conflicts in our culture. Now, there may be some of you who are completely comfortable dealing with conflict in your life. Not very many, probably. There are others who would prefer to never have to deal with it again. But unfortunately, that's not realistic. Conflict is part of our lives. It's impossible to be in any kind of relationship without it. We humans come to the relationship table with our preferences, our ideas, our different backgrounds, our experience, our expectations. And if you add to that a dash of fear and insecurity, and those reactions that come out of fear and insecurity, conflict happens, right? It's uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be scary. It can be a productive moment for growth and innovation. Amanda Ripley, who wrote the excerpt that Carl read earlier, she is a New York Times bestselling author, a Washington Post contributor, and a co-founder of a a media and training company called Good Conflict that helps people reimagine conflict. In her most recent book, she describes two kinds of conflict: healthy or good conflict, and what she calls high conflict. She says she was inspired to write about this topic because it seemed to her that we as a country were stuck in some perpetual conflict that was going, quote, nowhere interesting. In preparing for writing her book, she spent time with a politician in California, a former gang leader in Chicago, an activist in England, and frustrated voters in New York and Michigan. She writes, "Eventually, I realized that I was asking the wrong question. It's not about getting out of conflict. It's about getting out of high conflict. High conflict is different from the useful friction of healthy conflict. That's good conflict, and it's a force that pushes us to be better people. Good conflict is not the same as forgiveness or unity. It can be stressful or heated, but our dignity remains intact. Good conflict does not collapse into caricature. These days, we need more good conflict, not less." So I wonder if you can think of examples of good or healthy conflict in your life, and I'll give you a second to think about it. The ones that came to mind for me might be an instance where, say, you and your partner don't agree about what time to put the kids to bed. Or maybe you're in a group and your group has a task to do, but there are a lot more ideas than there are tasks. Or a productive debate within a governing body. Good conflict includes people listening to one another, and it often leads to creative solutions. In good conflict, though people's ideas might be criticized, their dignity is not attacked. That little bit of friction, like lighting a match, can lead to sparks of innovation and change. Ripley continues, "High conflict, by contrast, is what happens when conflict clarifies into a good versus evil kind of feud, the kind that has an us and a them. High conflict is what incites people to lose their minds in ideological disputes, political feuds, or gang vendettas. The force that causes us to lie awake at night, obsessed by a conflict with a sibling, a coworker, or a politician we've never met. Can you think of some instances of high conflict in your life or in our communal life? I can. Ripley goes on to describe what happens when we're in this high conflict situation. She writes, "In this state, each encounter with the other side, whether literal or virtual, becomes more charged. The brain behaves differently. We feel increasingly certain of our own superiority, and at the same time, more and more mystified by the other side. When we encounter them in person or on a cable news channel, we might feel a tightening in our chest, a dread mixed with rage, as we listen to whatever insane, misguided, dangerous thing the other side says." Can you relate? I've found myself in that mentality before, and when I'm face to face with someone who is not on my side, I'm definitely not listening to the better angels of my nature. That other person could say, "Good morning," and I'd think, "Good morning? Good morning? What an idiotic thing to say. How dare they?" When we're in that high conflict situation, our brains are not under their normal control. Instead of our prefrontal cortex being in charge, it's the amygdala, which is also sometimes called the lizard brain. It's part of our brainstem that initiates the reaction to a perceived threat. In conflict, in the instant we feel threatened, before even any conscious thought, the amygdala sounds the alarm. Ooga! Send in the stress hormones, send in the adrenaline. Blood, flow to the core. Muscles, get ready. You're going to need to fight or freeze or run away. Lungs, the muscles may need more oxygen. Rest of the brain, you stand down. I don't need you right now. I've got this. There's no time for thinking. This is an emergency. This happens without our knowledge or our participation. It's no wonder that some conflicts are never resolved, because the lizard brain's in charge. Likely due to what's called amygdala hijacking, Ripley notes in her book how similar human behavior is in high conflict of all kinds, whether it's an ugly divorce, a labor walkout, or a civil war. As Unitarian Universalists who hope to make this world a better place, one of our tasks is to transform ourselves so that we can help transform the world. As activist and organizer Adrienne Marie Brown writes, "We won't end the systemic patterns of harm by isolating and picking off individuals, just as we can't limit the communicative power of mycelium by plucking a single mushroom from the dirt. We need to flood the entire system with life-affirming principles and practices." To engage in this kind of transformation, she notes, will require us to become, what she says, excellent at being in conflict, which is a healthy, natural part of being human and biodiverse. In my reading, I have plucked out several life-affirming practices that I think we can use to do this. They include these. First, to understand and calm the lizard brain. Second, to uncover stories. Third, to find common ground and connect. And fourth, to ask powerful questions. So first, the lizard brain. A good first step is to understand that automatic reaction. Early in my ministerial formation, I began preaching occasionally at my home congregation. In the receiving line after the service, people would often shake my hand and then comment on how cold my hands were. At first, I was really confused. I didn't feel cold. In fact, my body felt hot and a little sweaty. But eventually I realized that those cold hands were part of my body preparing to meet a threat. The blood had flowed from my extremities to my core. My amygdala perceived that I was under threat in the pulpit. How would my words or how would I be received? Was I going to make a fool of myself? What would they say? I didn't always feel especially consciously stressed, but I obviously was. Once I realized what was going on, I started using some self-soothing. You see me use it almost every Sunday here, like this. Yeah? That deep breath helps your body know that everything's okay. Do you want to breathe with me? It helps to do it more than once, but once helps a little bit. Another technique to help slow down that lizard brain, that reaction, is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Has anybody heard of this? No. So 5, it lets you know that your body's not actually in danger. There's not a tiger around the corner. 5, the 5 is for noticing 5 things that you can see right at this moment and name them. I see faces, a piano, bricks, our beautiful windows, the pews. Next is 4 things you can feel. I feel my clothing. I feel my feet on the floor. I feel the wood of this pulpit. I feel how warm it is in here. 3 things you can hear. A little bit of rustling, maybe some birds, my voice, because I won't hush. 2, name 2 things you can smell. This is a harder one, but you could also think of 2 things you like to smell. For me, that might be mint or basil, cookies. And finally, 1 thing you can taste. And if you can't taste anything in your mouth, maybe just think of a favorite taste. Chocolate. That process helps you know what is actually here in the room around you, that the threat is maybe not as severe as you've thought. Calming that stress response can make the parts of your brain that can use reason available to you, leading to more productive conversations and actions. So first one, calm the lizard brain. The second practice is to uncover the stories on both sides of this conflict. You might wonder, why do I care so much about this issue? Why do they care so much about this issue? What makes it important to me? What makes it important to them? And then you might find there are stories that you're telling yourself about this situation, about what's happening, about the other person. You might find there are memories of your past experiences that are affecting how you're approaching this issue right here. One of the bitterest and most ridiculous fights that my husband Joe and I have ever had was early in our marriage, and it was all about putting sheets on the bed. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom and a community volunteer, and he was working as a hospital pharmacist. Monday was sheets day in the laundry rotation, and often when he came home from work, I wanted his help to put them on the bed. It was a big bed. It was much quicker. When he came home from work, though, he needed a little bit of buffer time before he joined the family with the little children. He wanted to lie down on the bed just a few minutes, and preferably not a bed that was piled high with pillows and a comforter. The story I was telling myself is this: I have been here all day carrying laundry from the basement to the second floor while also caring for the children, cooking, etc., etc. 3 minutes putting the sheets on the bed is not too much to ask. And under that, but not audible above all those complaints, was the story, he doesn't value me and what I do. And I learned from talking with him years later, when we could finally talk about it, was that his story was this: I've worked all day on my feet, dosing medications, attending codes, talking with patients, some of which who had very difficult stories. Is she just being passive aggressive? I just want to lie down. And under that, his story, she doesn't value me and what I do. We also had mixed in with these stories, we were telling memories of previous experiences, our families of origin, other relationships that were somehow similar. If you want to move conflict, you need to know yourself and know the story that you're telling. And you need to know the other person's story as well. That's a helpful step toward de-escalation and transformation, to uncover the stories. Practice number 3 is find the common ground and connect. Once you know the stories that each side is telling, it might be possible to find some common ground. Here's a controversial example, but if you take it, the conflict between people who are pro-life and those who are pro-choice. On the surface, this conflict is intractable. One side hopes there will never be another abortion. The other side hopes that anyone who wants an abortion will be able to get one easily. But we know that this issue is much more nuanced. Most Americans' opinions fall somewhere between those two poles. To talk to someone on the other side of this issue, it's important to know what your story is and to really listen and learn the stories on the other side and maybe find common ground. For the abortion issue, the common ground might be a deep respect for life of all kinds. Although we know the two sides would express this respect in different ways. As long as this remains an us versus them situation with the lizard brain in charge, it will remain stuck in high conflict. And the fourth practice I would like to highlight is ask powerful questions. A short book by Eric Vogt and his colleagues called The Art and Architecture of Powerful Questions outlines a process for creating these powerful questions. They're described as questions that open the conversation. They stimulate reflection. They challenge your assumptions, they generate energy, they touch deeper meaning, and they evoke more questions. Powerful questions build on the information gathered from the stories that have been uncovered about what it is that people really want. The fight about the sheets wasn't really about the sheets. A powerful question for us in that conflict might have been something like, how can we make sure that each of us feels valued? In the abortion conflict, it might be, what would a society that honors all life look like? We, Unitarian Universalists, want to change the world. Yes? Yes. We want our own lives and the lives of all people to be sweet and tender and fulfilling and exciting and full of laughter and love and liberation. We have the power to move the world a little closer to that goal, but it won't happen if we either run from conflict or we escalate it to a level where no one can see that the people on the other side are three-dimensional human beings. Leave the lizard brain behind as much as you can. With deep breaths, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Uncover the stories. Find common ground. Connect. Ask powerful questions. We can do this. We can answer the call of love to transform our conflicts together. May it be so.